I'm Carl Leopson from the University of Arizona, and I'm here with Caroline Guardino and Elizabeth Fullerton, both assistant professors at. Well, tell me about yourself.
I'm Dr. Caroline Guardino, and I'm an assistant professor at University of North Florida in the Exceptional Student and Deaf Education Department.
Great. Where'd you get your undergraduate degree?
I got my undergrad in San Francisco, my master's in special ed in San Francisco as well, and then came to U of A for my doctorate.
Right. And Elizabeth. So tell
I'm
us.
also an assistant professor at UNF, but I'm in the childhood education department in the program area for early childhood. I got my undergraduate degree at Trinity College in Washington, D.C. in early childhood. And I got my master's and PhD at the University of Florida, go Gators, in early childhood special ed.
How cool.
Yeah.
So, just what's your research about? What do you guys do?
Well, it's kind of fun to give you a little bit of history. So, we both started at UNF 3 years ago, and they did have at the time a support group for junior faculty for writing. So we both came there with our dissertations, trying to whittle it down to a publishable piece, and realized that our research overlaps. Elizabeth's in early childhood and mine in special education, and her having the special education background, it was pretty exciting. So Elizabeth,
So we decided to do a research project together around, our research is really on what I would call first line behavior management. So what the teacher can do before she needs to do more aggressive intervention. So the first thing we really do is look at the classroom environment. And for early childhood, that's actually built in to the way that we teach teachers, but that isn't necessarily true in other disciplines. They don't spend quite as much time in the environment. And unfortunately, in early childhood, once the children are out of kindergarten, the teachers tend to spend less time on the environment because they get sucked into that elementary school mentality where it doesn't appear to be quite as important, which it actually is. So,
and I guess I'm sure in most of your students in either this course or another course of their over their course of study will have reviewed that triangle, the positive behavior support, and that first element addresses the environment. And so we're firm believers that if you don't address the classroom environment first and make sure that that's cohesive to learning, then learning is not going to happen. So we look at the classroom environment, a variety of settings, and I'm sure we'll go over that in more detail with you later, and analyze how we can make it more conducive to learning for the students and then cohesive to teaching for the teacher.
Oh, that's very cool.
And also, some of it is just how can the environment be more pleasant for everyone? And so the teacher part is really critical. Is this a place where you want to be every day? And so we try to really take into consideration what works for each individual teacher, because it's not the same for every teacher.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I talked to all my undergraduate teachers about that, about what kind of environment do you want to teach in, and you have the opportunity to create it.
Exactly. Yes.
So,
right.
Caroline, I remember when you took a single subject class with me quite a while ago now, that this was the idea that you came up with.
I think you're forgetting the piece where you helped guide me to come up with this idea. So I don't think I could take all the credit, but I did have an idea. My specialty is working with deaf students who have disabilities, so ADHD, behavior challenges, learning disabilities, and I wanted to address what would be the best strategy to helping these students, which often are 50% of our learners. So we have several of those children in one classroom. And so you and I started talking, and the idea came up, like, hey, let's target their environment. And then we started talking about designs, and I wrote the proposal for my dissertation in your course.
And that's just a great piece of advertising, because I tell students I usually have at least a quarter of the class comes out of there with a dissertation. ready to go.
I actually wrote my dissertation proposal in my single subject class with Dr. Conroy.
Really?
I did. My idea came from that class, and I actually did mine on teachers using specific praise statements in child care centers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I think it is a good plug because graduate students tend to start with this topic that's way too big, way too big. And so a class like this can really narrow your focus down and get to that really teeny tiny question that you need to answer.
And you may as well work smart. And if you're going to be in there and you have to write a proposal, think of it in terms of something that you actually want to implement.
Right, that you're going to use.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
So students in the class are going to read the article that you published in Teaching Exceptional Children. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Wow. So that was our first research project. That was right after the writers group where we realized that our research interests overlap, and Elizabeth was trained at UF to always conduct pilots, which I didn't think was a bad idea because I knew that I put a lot of money into the dissertation, and that was with 3 different classrooms, a multiple baseline, and I knew it could be expensive. So we
did a pilot. The study that was done for the TEC article was a case study in a classroom in what's considered an at-risk neighborhood in North Florida. We actually were in a 4th grade, and one of the things that happened to us, which we will caution students against, is we went into a school and we had a class that we had picked out that had children who were hard of hearing because Caroline wanted that and I wanted early childhood. And so we found that match and we went in there and we started the research, and someone in the school decided, not the principal, that she didn't want us in that class.
Wow.
Not the teacher either, but someone who had a certain amount of power. And so we had to leave. So one of the things I think that's really important when you do this kind of research is you're really enmeshed in the life of the setting that you're in, and you have to be flexible because sometimes things like that happen. And so we went to a different classroom where it was a new teacher, and she was having a lot of trouble with children's pretty serious acting out behavier.
I mean, no, not pretty serious, okay. Like extremely serious, challenging behaviors. And I want to piggyback on what Elizabeth says because, you know, not only do you want to make sure that you're enmeshed in the school setting, but you also want to know that the teacher you're working with is committed. And so although the original teacher was not able to work with us, the teacher who we inherited was more than eager because of the behavior she was experiencing.
It turned out fine, but initially it was very difficult because we'd already put quite a bit of time and effort into the first classroom, and we lost all. We just had to say, okay, thank you.
Wow.
But
yeah.
So that study is really, we had questions whether or not, or how much the environment would help reduce the problem behaviors because the behaviors were so severe. But we were pleasantly surprised, and that article it took a lot of metamorphosizing before it was actually published, because it started off as a very research-based article and then transitioned to one that's practitioner-based. And you also have to be willing to accept that. And for your students, I'll say, be ready to accept that you need to add another independent variable. If you be willing to change your not the design as much, but to add more beef to it if that's what your committee requests, or if that's what Dr. Leopson requests, because you really learn a lot by having more information, by collecting more data. And that's something that we learned when we were there. Okay, we're going to have to go in there and let's look at several different angles so that we can provide feedback at various levels. We were able to shape it into a practitioner-based article because really the intervention is relevant to both researchers and the practitioners.
The other thing that came as a surprise to us and has moved us in a little bit of a different direction of research or an additional direction within the research we're doing, is the impact the environment had on the teacher and her ability to teach, and actually how many redirection comments she was making during the day. We took that kind of as side data, and now we have found in our subsequent studies that that's actually a huge part of it, that teacher comments dropped like 80%. Once they have the environment set up and the kids know what they're supposed to do, the teacher just stops giving directions, which is more pleasant for both the teacher and the children, because that nag factor has gone away.
So you're going to take that additional piece of data from now on when you...
Yeah, we are. We've
done
3 subsequent studies, or 2. We're starting our 3rd now, and that's now become a piece of what we actually look for, is how many what's the droppage in teacher comments, and that's been a very dramatic.
So for your study that was in TEC, it was an A/B design, and I'm assuming that's because it was a pilot and because it's not an intervention. You could withdraw it, but it would be really difficult to withdraw.
In this case, it would have been impossible, because we were like, what is that home improvement show? Whatever, where you come in and redo the
clean house,
something like that. Yeah.
And it's really, we had talked about this earlier. In some circumstances, it's unethical because the problem behaviors are so extreme. Then you go in there, you make changes, and the students enjoy it, and the teachers enjoying it. Do you really want to see it go back to chaos? I mean, you don't.
Right. So
it's not fair.
So there's a practical question, but there's also an ethical question.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So have you done multiple baseline studies for some of your other work?
Yes, we have.
Well, here's another caveat. When you have teacher buy-in, you have to make sure you know to what degree. We had started a year ago a multiple baseline with 3 teachers and 4, and then 1 withdrew because principal conflict, and then when we got ready to start, another one withdrew, so we ended up with 2, which is not a multiple baseline.
Right.
So we conducted the study regardless because we were already committed to those 2 teachers, and it wasn't until this past fall that we completed a multiple baseline.
Wow.
Yes. The other thing about, I think, this kind of research, and I found this when I was also doing research at UF, is it can be very fatiguing for everyone, because sometimes it goes on longer than you anticipate depending on how the data looks. And so you really have to have your teachers, I think what Caroline says is true. They really have to want to see it happen and also understand that it might in fact not work. That you may be in there and do the intervention and then there is no change. So you have to have teachers who are interested, I think in a sense, the teachers who are really also interested in their professional growth, in learning about research and the impact of research in their classroom. And in this last study, we had some funding. So we were able to tell the teachers that if we get accepted to a conference, they can go.
Wow.
So that, we weren't bribing them or anything. It was just that ability for their own professional development, that's really exciting because they don't often get to go to a national conference.
Mm-hmm. No, that is exciting.
So that was good. Yeah.
So where do you think you're going to go from here with your work? You have some funding now, and where do you see this leading?
Well, obviously we've chosen single subject research, the design, because we always work with small populations. It's not like we're going to go and change every classroom in a school, although
we'd like to.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe a reality show or something.
It would work.
It would work, I know.
So because of that, we started off with, we definitely wanted an inclusion classroom where we had children with special needs. We're always looking for different settings. So we've done self-contained. We've done
special ed.
Self-contained special ed.
Early childhood special, self-contained early childhood. Yeah.
And then we just completed through 2 inclusion classrooms across 4 different transition times, and we're experimenting with possibly changing the design and withdrawing. We're doing an A-B design. We're going to start off with a pilot study. And the way that we will work around the ethical issue is to work in a classroom. We're not exactly going to collect data on behavior as much as the time it takes for the students to transition from one academic subject to the next. Because what we found in this latest study, which is really exciting, is that even though we've only shaved a minute off of transition times, students transition around 14 times a day in early elementary classrooms. So if you add up those minutes and say, okay, over the course of a day, they save about 10 minutes. If you calculate that over a week, it's almost an hour. Then you do how many weeks that students are in school? 32. 32 hours. How many more?
It's like a whole week of instruction.
No, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make the point that, you know, we actually want to see, okay, we're going to change it and then see. So we're playing with design, we're playing with environments, we're playing with populations, because we want to keep the same strand. That's essential. We know we want to look at the classroom environment or environments in total.
That last measure you're talking about is really interesting and I think really important. IES, the funding agency, is including in all of its reviews that there's some requirement that you show cost effectiveness or you show some additional benefit that you just talked about.
That's a huge benefit. And the one thing one of the questions you had sent Caroline was what advice do we have?
Yes.
You have to find someone to work with. For us, that really has been a critical piece of reaching out and looking for somebody who has a similar interest, because it would have been really hard for us to do this work on our own.
And not a lot of researchers fully understand or support single subject. So you're up against, there's mathematicians, those people in biology, they're using this deep statistical analysis that we can't because we don't have the numbers that they have. Right. So we know what single subject is, and it's depending on us together as a team to prove to them this is valuable research, this is like large effect in the classrooms that we're working in. Now look at these numbers, and doing it, not the same thing over and over, but doing this line of research and continuously, so that we've gone from getting $500 of funding to $1,500. Now we're up to $5,000.
Yeah.
The next grant's $50,000. So we're just like, you've got to start somewhere. But there's a lot of proof in single subject research, and we're showing that.
Yeah. I'd also say early on in the first study, and then briefly maybe in another, we were in contact too.
We have that too, is that you have to
Conroy.
go back. Yeah, is to go back to your mentors and keep going back and asking them, especially, for example, at our university, which is not a Research One university, where there really isn't anybody above us, who's at a higher level of researching, who's doing this kind of research. Yeah. So we're we consider ourselves novice researchers. Maybe we're moving to the advanced beginner level now. So we feel fine about calling you or other people, and I think you have to feel okay about that and not feel like, well, I've already finished school, so I should know how to do this. You really have to keep that learning curve going. Well, we did anyway.
We do. When we have a problem with a single subject design, we call Gaston Woolery.
Okay, there you go.
Awesome.
Get that number.
Well, in looking at the questions I sent you, we've really walked through a lot of it. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
I'd say, it's important also to be flexible, because, research is ever changing, and what you think or expect will happen may not. Mm-hmm. So we also, like we said originally, were prepared to work with a different teacher than we had intended. We also know that, schools may not want you in during their standardized testing, which could be a period of 2 to 3 weeks, depending on when people test. So just be flexible, because the more flexible you are, then the more willing they are to work with you, because they know that you want to be there and they want to show that they're doing action research, but you just have to, get the timing right.
Yeah, that's really important.
Excellent.
Work around the life of the school. Yeah, that's true.
Well, Dr. Elizabeth Fullerton and Dr. Caroline Guardino at University of North Florida, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.